etc. So let's go for it.
Just very quickly, I may have to leave the room sharpish at 11. So if we run over, would you mind kind of finishing things up?
No problem.
Cool. Okay, so let me know when we're live.
We're live. Go for it.
Excellent. Great. I'm very pleased to be joined by Tim Sutton. Tim is director of Cartosa, which he co-founded in 2014. Cartosa aims to make spatial decision-making tools available to everyone so we can responsibly manage our precious Earth and properly serve the societies that inhabit it. Today, Tim's work at Cartosa focuses mainly on humanitarian, social, upliftment, and environmental projects. Tim is deeply involved in QGIS, including being the former QGIS.org board chair. And in 2018, Tim was awarded the Perpetual Honorary QGIS Project Steering Committee member status and continues to play an active role in many aspects of the QGIS projects. So Tim's a great person to tell us about 20 years of QGIS, successes and failures of a global phenomenon. So I'm really looking forward to his talk. Please do post your questions. Please feel free to post them in the YouTube chat or in the Matrix room, and then I'll collate them and read them out for Tim at the end of the presentation. Excellent. So hand over to you, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be presenting here today. As Nick already mentioned, I'll be telling you a little bit about just some thoughts about how the QGIS project has evolved and where we had successes and failures. Everybody likes a story of tragedy, so I'm going to tell you all the things that we did wrong, but or that I think we did wrong. But this is really not a doom and gloom talk. It's I really want you to stay optimistic, but sometimes it's good to have a retrospective and think like, what could we have done differently? And that's really what this talk is about, is to see where the potential inflection points were in our project history and that we could have changed things. So this is this talk. I am completely guilty or complicit in many of the things that I mentioned here. And I was naive when I started in the project and also didn't think far into the future. So this is part confession, part contrition, part expose of just my thoughts on the project. I'll mention that the talk contains some mild curse words. I apologize for that. And brace yourself for disappointment because this talk does not contain lots of maps. I'm so sorry about that. Usually I like to put lots of maps in my talks. And I really apologize for the artwork. As you'll see, the talk centers around some rather dubious artwork, sort of created by myself, as you'll see as the talk unfolds. So one more caveat I would mention is that QGIS is a very big project. It's got a lot of moving parts. If you're watching this talk looking for tips on how to run your own project, not everything may apply to equally to your project, because if it's a smaller project, some of these things just won't be relevant. But hopefully there's some sage gems of advice for you here if you are contemplating a new project, or if you want to help QGIS be a better project. So our first real misturn, I think, was that the project's gender, racial, and other sort of economic diversity from the point of view of the people that make QGIS is very poor. I mean, we are a bunch of white European males, by and large, that have sort of come together to make the project. And while we do have contributions from women, people of color, and so on, they're not nearly as representative in the project as they should be in the making of the project. So my suggestion would be really to find projects that don't have these kind of issues and learn from them, and like try to, from the ground up, make your project diverse. And this is not just to tick a new age millennial tick box, but being a diverse project actively helps the project be representative of the needs of all of your users at the end of the day. To fix this, I mean, we have been actively seeking out people from diverse geographies and enticing them to participate. And but like adding diversity into your project afterwards is a hard problem to fix, and it's good to have that culture from the ground up. On the plus side, we have a really diverse user community, and part of our mission in the project has always been to be a top quality open source GIS that intentionally supports diversity in race, gender, and especially economic status and geography. And for me, as a personal ambition in QGIS, has always been to fill the gap where other GIS solutions left people behind because they weren't economically empowered to participate. And we are actively working to make the project more inclusive. And I hope that in 20 years' time, the slide will have a bunch more women and people of different backgrounds in it when I give this talk again. Another thing that I think we took a misturn on was that when we started the project, we didn't really have any idea what the landscape of technology would look like in 20 years' time. And we didn't really think beyond the next few months of working on the project. And the choices we made about how submissions were made to the project, how we deal with what turned out to be a large influx of different people submitting code to the project, basically means that any alteration in the licensing modality is impossible. And that's sort of the design of the GPL really, is to sort of lock that license in and make it so that people need to like perpetually adhere to that same license. But there are situations where you do need to change the license. And we actually have precedents for this. Back in 2004, Gary sent out this email to everybody, which was at that stage just a handful of us contributors, saying, we want to make an exception to the license to support some changes in the way that the Qt library, which QGIS depends on, we want to accommodate for this in the licensing. And he sent out an email like this, and we all wrote back and said, yeah, we agree to this change. And it was possible to do that because we're a small group of people. We don't know what's going to come down the line. We already see like massive changes in the technology landscape. For example, applications are barely deployed on desktops anymore. They're all going into cloud environments. And not being able to manage your own license, for me, is a real shortcoming of our project and something that we cannot really fix anymore. And relating to the license as well, I think that the license for me has been a source of some ambivalence, because I love being an open source project and all the good things that it brings, but it also it creates some confusion about why we exist as a project. And for me, the question is really, do we exist to serve our users or to serve an ideal? And a lot of people that come to the project come for the second reason. They come to serve an ideal. They want a world where all software is free and there's no proprietary software vendors, and like every piece of software you run on every environment is open source and free in the Richard Stallman sense. And for me, that is not why I love open source. I love it for more pragmatic reasons, and that is that it really serves our users well. It allows us to put software in the hands of many people who wouldn't otherwise be able to use the software. And the kumbaya, let's say, part of the license is something I really got swept up in the beginning of my career as an open source developer. But I realized that often it can create a level of toxicity and exclusion, which is the very contrary effect that we want the license to have. On the success side, why it was a good choice is that being an open source project has attracted a huge, vibrant and friendly community to the project. And many of the people that came to the project because of these sort of philosophical reasons have added a huge amount of value and joy to the people that use the software and that participate in the project. And so just one like sort of point to mention on this is that this open source idea is great, but it's a rallying point only for a small set of our community members. I think by and large, most of our users are almost oblivious to the license, and us getting lost in the narrative of the license rather than on how we can serve our users, like works to our disadvantage. And another guilty thing that I'm really guilty of is bashing the incumbent GIS vendors and products. It's still a fun thing to do, to be honest, sometimes, but I do it in a lighthearted way, and I hope it's taken lightheartedly. But I don't think it's been a very healthy thing for us to do it as a project, because it is something that creates conflict, and it creates polarization. And really, if we spend time focusing on how disingenuous or bloated or expensive or what have you our competitors are, we spend energy on the wrong things and it isn't productive. And this is especially when basically these vendors' products are largely irrelevant to us as QGIS users and people that use QGIS. The products are not mutually exclusive, and by and large, the people that are using QGIS have already made the conscious decision to use both, or to use QGIS exclusively, or are oblivious to the other products. So there's not much real benefit in bashing vendors. And really, what I would like us to be focusing on, wish we'd focus on more in the last 20 years, is the narrative that we are the best GIS project, period, and the rest is all irrelevant. We don't need to compare ourselves with these other vendors' products. I mean, some time ago we set up this dashboard to try to track just the number of users, because as an open source project, it's really difficult to know who's using the software that you make and how many people are using it and so on. If we look at the numbers, just for example, 12, almost 13 million people that opened QGIS at least once in the last 30 days. I mean, it's staggering the success the project has in its own right, and we really don't need to be concerned with the activities or goings on of other projects we accept as success in our own right. Some of the other things that I think we misstepped on are relating to how we onboard work from contributors. And in the beginning, again, I was especially guilty of being really free form and open about accepting contributions. I was certainly my role in the project, I was always so overjoyed when somebody came to the project with some new contribution. I more or less blanket accepted contributions from people, but that did create a legacy of difficulties for us in terms of code of varying quality, lack of testing frameworks, basically a legacy of code which was not always brought in by design, but rather by evolution, means that we are now left today with a lot of QA issues that we need to deal with. But on the success side of the story, we have really had in the last, 5 to 8 years, a huge focus on QA and trying to make QGIS not only more featureful, but also more stable and reliable. And some of our intrepid developers have put in a lot of their own time, not funded by anybody, just writing tests and building testing systems and frameworks to let us actually know that QGIS is the best product it can possibly be. And we've also been adding to the project protocols so that when new features arrive, they come with tests and so on. And this is really something that would have been great to have part of the project culture from day one. And similarly to the code with the documentation, it's been a problem for us over the life of the project, because in the beginning we did insist on documentation, but also we didn't have clear guidelines about how documentation should be written. Even just simple things like what should be written in the first person or third person or what have you. The documentation systems are quite technical, which makes it difficult perhaps for people to contribute to the documentation. So that's definitely been something that I would have gone, if I could go back to day one of QGIS, I would have tried to set up a nice user-friendly documentation system with well-defined standards of how documentation should be done. On the plus side, we've got some amazing documentation writers in our community team. They absolutely do fantastic work, but they're really working on the back foot, both for the deluge of new features arriving in QGIS, but also for the fact that for many years, a lot of the features that are in QGIS just weren't documented. And so there's this huge backlog of work that they need to take care of. And again, if you're in any way inclined to help QGIS, writing documentation is a fantastic contribution to us. Even if you, don't understand the documentation systems, just put it in a LibreOffice or Word document, and it's the words that we care about, not how the words are brought into the system. And in sort of parallel with this, the code that we accept now, we don't really like to accept code if it doesn't come with documentation for developers and users. And it's also important to emphasize that when we talk about documentation, we're not only concerned with like point and click instructions for a user, but also internally in the code, like how new functionality should be used in the code base. But on the counterpart to that, as a success, QGIS has got an amazing set of documentation despite all these challenges. And I often disparage that people haven't actually gone to look in the documentation before they ask questions and reach out for help, because so much of QGIS is beautifully documented, and we've got training manuals and all sorts of other tools to help you get your way around QGIS. And it's been a huge labor of love. And I would say, just as a shout out, a labor of love by mostly an invisible team. And it's hard to really give enough credit to the people that have been working on the documentation, but thank you to them all.
Just about 4 minutes left, Tim.
Okay, thanks. I'll speed talk. Another area where we didn't really establish good guidelines in the beginning was in HIG, which is the Human Interface Guidelines for the project. And so for the longest time, we had a lot of mishmash looking user interfaces. But on the success side of that, QGIS, although it's a very complicated and feature-rich application, we often hear praise from people about how approachable and easy it is to use. And we do have people in the team that are really focused on making it more usable and consistent and so on. Another huge thing that I think we misstepped on in the beginning was thinking of money as a dirty word. And ultimately, every project needs money, and you have to have a plan how to get it, how to manage it, how to spend it. And QGIS today still is severely underfunded, and it's hard to introduce funding as a narrative into such a long-established project. But we really need to up our game in terms of getting more funding. On the plus side, we have achieved such amazing things with the limited funding we have, and we have many generous donors and sustaining members who've supported our work to date. We just need more of it because there's so much more we want to do for you as users. And also, a lot of people thought money would be a turn-off and scare contributors away from the project, and we somehow were reticent about talking about money a lot in the project. But in reality, I don't think it's been the case. By and large, the money just adds to the project. It doesn't detract or reduce the number of volunteer contributions that we get. And the money that we do get is we spend paying for professional services from people who probably already contributed. So now they get paid to work on something they love doing, which is really great. Donated code can be costly. I'm going to still try to speed talk my way through this last couple of slides, but we in the beginning of the project, like I said, we're quite open and accepting of big code drops, but we have to be really wary. Are you getting a giant turd or a sparkly gem? Code contributions need to come with a commitment to maintain it. And in the past, we weren't always good about procuring that commitment, and that means that we sort of sit with the burden of maintaining people's code drops. Recently, we've been addressing this, for example, removing the DB2 driver, and we've had big contributions from people like SAP or SAP, and put them through a lot of due diligence in the process to try to address the situation. You're going to have to just cut me off because I've probably run out of time. But one of the other things that I should mention is that in an open source project, there are often a few very loud contrarian voices that can derail great ideas. And so I would just put out there that when you're running an open source community-based project, find mechanisms and ways to deal with contrarian voices who don't often speak for the majority, but who derail good initiatives. And we've tried to do that as a community through just informed dialogue and good discourse. But it still happens that people can derail good initiatives just because they're outspoken about one particular thing. Great ideas without people to implement them are crap ideas. We had a lot of people bringing ideas to the project, but not bringing the plan to actually implement them. So when you're getting working in a project like QGIS, it's great to have great ideas, but just make sure that you've got ways to have somebody follow up on ideas. And great ideas that are so complicated, they won't attract anybody to implement them. For example, we've had long discussions about improving Python support to include like package management, sandboxing, Jupyter notebooks, and things like that. But they're so complicated that nobody will step up and actually do it.
Do you want to quickly wrap up, and then we've got a couple of questions?
Yeah, I think this is my last slide. So we want to just appeal to you to help us fix our failures and turn them into successes. So reach out to us if you can and help in these areas where we're struggling. We want and will appreciate your help. And we really, despite all these things that I mentioned, we've been a huge success. And a lot of that is just because people do step up and help and see where problems are and try to fix them. So thank you to the artist. In case you haven't figured out, I was using some rather dodgy OpenAI for my artwork. And if you want to get hold of me or find out how to help in the project, feel free to contact me at my contact details below. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tim. That's a really interesting presentation, and lots of opportunity for people to help. Lots of love for the artwork as well, both in the YouTube chat and in the Matrix room. So that went down really well.
Richard Leeson already has asked if you use DALL-E.
Yes, I did use DALL-E.
So first question from Robin. QGIS seems to have been quite successful compared to lots of other open source projects at getting various commercial consultancies, developers working on funded improvements. Do you have any insights as to why this might be?
Well, I think firstly, we're filling a need that people have, right? So if you're going to be successful, you need to do something that people are asking for. And we came at the right time, the right, place in terms of like there was grass GIS when we started, but people were looking for a pointy clicky equivalent to something like ArcView, what have you, and QGIS arrived on the scene, and there were also no tools to work with PostGIS really nicely in the desktop GIS. So we filled that need was the first thing, and the second thing was we really worked hard to build a community. Like you get different modalities for building open source projects. Ours is a grassroots project. That means we didn't have any top-down funding or any like central authoritative control of how the project ran. We just were a community of people, and I think that doesn't always work, but in our case, it was a huge success factor because we manage to attract this really great community around the project.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, there seems to be quite a bit of happenstance as well with some of these things, and you never know it's going to be successful until after the fact.
Exactly.
Nicholas Duggan asks, how do you know which new features and tools to add? How do you manage the backlog? So I think you alluded to this a little bit in terms of, who do you say yes to and not just saying yes to everything?
Yeah, so over the years, the process of adding features has become more and more onerous because we have a lot of features already. And I think the general guideline is if you're bringing a feature to QGIS, it needs to be broadly usable. So like if you bring something that's very niche for one specific user group, probably will ask you to put it in a plugin or some third-party space. There needs to be a commitment to maintain it, so that we don't get those code drop phenomenons. And it needs to be written well and sort of implemented in a sympathetic way to the code base. And so if all of those criteria are met and articulated clearly in a QEP, which is the QGIS enhancement proposal, generally there wouldn't be too much resistance, but just getting that magic formula right can be difficult. And maybe a fourth magic ingredient is being part of the community and having social currency so that you can actually converse with the other developers and community members and express your plans clearly to them so that they're like sympathetic and enthusiastic about it. Really helps to get features into the project as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, and that kind of informal element I think is key as well. And another question, Mike Spencer. What would QGIS look like now if you weren't constrained by a specific license?
Well, for me, I would, if it was my own choice, which is not probably a popular choice, I'd put it under an MIT license and have a contributor agreement so that every contributor basically ceded their intellectual property to the project so that the project steering committee and the management of the project could adapt the license to changing times. Really wouldn't be a huge change from my point of view. It'd still be open source and carry it itself on the way it does, but it would have the agility to deal with changing times.
Mm-hmm. Cool, wonderful. And we've got another question, Christopher McNeil. QGIS has a lot of dependencies on GDAL. How would you manage that? How do you manage that with the GDAL maintainers? I suppose
manage, it almost sounds like a sort of negative connotation, but it's a fantastic thing that we got this dependency on GDAL because it provides us huge amount of benefit, and our users get to open 500 different file formats for free. I mean, it's obviously not for free because Evan Ruel and the GDAL team put in a huge amount of work to make GDAL what it is, and our team makes a huge amount of work to do that integration. So that's a great thing. I mean, they wouldn't change a thing about how we do it. I mean, we build on the shoulders of giants, and we don't want to re-implement all the work that's gone before us.
Cool. One final question, which is actually from me. So I was really interested in how you talked about QGIS kind of in the field of other GIS applications. And so, Esri is the elephant in the room here. And I'm very pragmatic, so very much use the best tool for the job. Do you think there's potential for kind of more collaboration with other partners? Esri being the obvious one, but there are others out there as well. And is there potential for that to be really successful?
I think that there isn't any collaboration now. So the only potential change would be to have more, because we couldn't have less than we have now. So, but there would be probably some skepticism from the community, but I would welcome it if it was sincere, and we could say, for example, work on common standards for data formats or file interchange, or not have to reverse engineer file formats to be able to read styles from Esri classes, or give them, I mean, there's not much really we can offer them other than to perhaps make it easier for ArcGIS people to take QGIS projects or something, but everything's open source, so they have what they need really. But sure, I mean, if you want to create healthy dialogue in an equitable world, you've got to be willing to talk to everybody, and I would sit around the table with them without a problem.
Wonderful. Great. So thank you very much, Tim. That was a fascinating presentation, and thanks everyone for the questions as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So